unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news to anybody who was on my optimistic side last week when we had Craig Pasta on the show. We were doing our top censored news of the week, which we do on Thursdays. And Greta Thunberg going to Gaza with aid was the number one story that we felt was not being reported on accurately. Not saying that we knew for sure that it was going to do anything good, but we did know that it was something seemingly heroic that was getting misrepresented by outlets on the right and was worth the number one story of the week, top censored news. Craig Pasta, however, pushed back and said, no. The whole thing's one big psyop. And we had a little friendly debate about it, friendly discussion. You guys can go back and check that top censored news of the week from last week's show. Well, I hate to say it, but Pasta was right. Greta Thunberg's IDF capture, in quotations, proves it was one big psyop. I know. I can hear him right now. I told you so. Well, let's walk it through. So, starting with this was the original news announced last week, and it's interesting that Jewish Voice for Peace was showing this and displaying this and telling us that there were 12 activists, including Greta, that were headed to Gaza to bring much needed aid. That we know that the IDF, our government, Israel government, are starving to death 2.3 million people. So we thought that was a good thing. Knowing that Greta's history is really captured with the environmental movement, we know that she was used and exploited as a child. We know these things. We also know that the sentiment had changed as far as the media and how they report on her. When we look at the way the daily, what is this? The Daily Times. They're telling us that she's got narcissism. It's terrifying. This is self-serving stunt. Her riding on the boat, tweeting it out or whatever, putting in that picture with her with the Palestinian flag, saying it's all a stunt. And I'm thinking, that's interesting because they never did this to her before. As far as this is so these outlets. Let's look at this. So this is, if you guys didn't see, so this is before. This is like the Wayback Machine. So before she started criticizing Israel, she was embraced by the establishment media, right? All these different articles. We won't go through each of them, but you see the putting her up on this pedestal. But after Israel, now she's not a kid anymore. She's like 27 years old. They're calling it a tragedy. Being with Gaza is horrible. She's anti-Semite of the week, according to the New York Post. So I don't know. I just felt like something changed. And then, of course, we had the Lindsey Graham tweet. Hope her friends can swim. I mean, her and her friends can swim. I mean, that is just awful. You talk about all the people that Israel has murdered and the aid workers, and the fact that this boat. Like, I'm not saying it didn't go. I'm not saying this is a theater in the sense that she didn't make the trip. She certainly made the trip. She certainly was detected by drones. She certainly was in a position where there were these other activists with her. That it was a terrifying situation. Look, I'm not saying that it was a safe thing and everything checks out. I'm saying that it is scary to do something like this, but at the end of the day, she was used her whole package deal of being the face of the operation of the rescue team because it's less likely, and this was I think this makes sense, that if it was legit, if it wasn't a psyop, if you were a noble group of people that wasn't Greta Thunberg, if you were independently noble and independently were strategizing about how do we actually get aid to the people in Gaza, how do we do that if every aid group has been murdered, or they drop the aid off and the aid is destroyed, or worse, the Palestinians pick up the food and then they're killed as they're picking up the food. If that happens every time and these people are still starving, how would we go about getting the aid to them, and they actually have the aid and have the food? What you would recruit somebody like a Greta Thunberg. So that was an idea that made sense to me, that if it were real, that's what it would look like. But Craig also made the point that if it were fake, this is also what it would look like. So both were true at the same time. This looked like it could be real and fake at the same time. Because real, it would have been you. That's exactly what you would do. Recruit somebody to say this will protect us as we're actually getting aid. So we were kind of got to a let's wait and see what happens. Then all the LA protests, raids, ICE raids, all that took our attention. We kind of missed. Well, what happened? And we were looking at it. And she did that interview. You guys saw the interview with Amy Goodman on the way. She was saying, we're doing this. We're standing by. I don't care what Lindsey Graham says on Twitter. I don't give a crap. If he's suggesting we should all be murdered, or they're going to blow up the ship and we'll be stranded in the water. We're going to drown to death. I'm focused on one thing, getting aid to Gaza. Okay. So what happened next? This happened next. I guess we're going to call it Sandwich Gate. Here's the shot that they didn't really want to show you on Fox, but I'm going to show you the Fox shot. But this is the distribution of food to the ship when it was captured by Israel. Here we go.
Where is he?
Okay, so they take the food. They're obviously not getting killed, but they're calling this a capture. So they're being held. I guess some tweets went out about how she's being held hostage. Of course, people are pushing back and saying this doesn't look like a hostage situation, because everybody knows, and this is what's so funny, is that Fox and friends and people on that, they're not gonna tell you about how Israel actually treats people they capture. They're not going to tell you how bad they treat them. They're going to pretend that it's Hamas that has all the hostages that are being treated or tortured and every time Hamas releases a hostage, they come home and go, oh, I was treated very nicely. We know that Palestinian hostages are not, they're treated so bad. They're raped, they're tortured, they're humiliated, they have psychological problems when they come back, they're malnutritioned, they're all everything. And so they're not going to tell you that, but they'll tell you that this looks fake, which we think it is, but not for the reason. They're not going to tell you why. Like, we think it's fake because that if they're going to capture them, you're not going to film it like this, and you're not going to be passing out food. So there's an element. It's pretty effing obvious that the IDF wanted to use this as an opportunity to show that they like to give out food to people, and everybody falls for that. And it's not really the case. And like, look, this is, and again, Fox is not going to tell you that IDF is being maliciously deceptive. They're trying to misrepresent how they treat people, and this is a PR stunt. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to blame it all on Greta, who now I think Greta is still being used, still being told what to do, still controlled, probably by some the cabal or whatever we call it. Because every bit of this, and again, this is the raw footage, and it still doesn't look that good, as far as it doesn't look that authentic, because the cameras are on and it looks like it's a staged event by the IDF, by Western media. And this is supposed to be, that's what it really looked like. But then they're sharing this picture. You guys see the picture? The picture is the problem. Well, all of it is a problem. The picture is probably the worst because it's that snapshot. You guys know which snapshot we're talking about. Well, Fox is going to show us how bad that snapshot picture is. It's so bad because Greta Thunberg is smiling in it. So that's what they're running with. You want to see them cover it? It's a little cringy, but here we go.
Because here's the thing. This is not what kidnapping looks like. Kafir Beavis knows what kidnapping is like. He was an 8-month-old baby. Yarden Beavis knows what kidnapping looks like. He survived. His wife did not, Shiri, as she was clutching those 2 little redheaded boys. That's what kidnapping looks like. Clutching your babies as you go off to a death sentence. Not eating a sandwich handed to you by IDF. These individuals are apparently going to be forced to watch IDF footage from the day of October 7th. She needs to see it. Greta, this is not a kidnapping. The hundreds of hostages who were kidnapped understand that. It's time you understand it too.
Preach.
Yeah.
So true. All right, we'll move on.
It's kind of disgusting that they can't like step outside of their little defend Israel at all costs box and look at what's really going on. They got like 10% of it right. They're telling their audience that there's something staged about this, but they're blaming it all on Greta because this insinuation that she just hates Jews for some reason, or she's got some mental illness problem, and she needs to grow up. Well, you heard what they said. Greta is going to be forced to see footage of October 7th, which nobody else has seen. The only people that have seen the October 7th footage are people that don't want you to know how bad it is, and they won't show you because it's so bad. So bad. Well, they're going to be forced. And now you guys are starting to understand what this whole thing was about. It's not about Greta being a stubborn, I don't want to hear about how great Israel is, Jew hater. It's about the optics for Israel and them wanting to put people through this charade that Greta is stubborn and she's stupid. And Israel's great. Israel's great because they give sandwiches to captives. And by the way, they call them prisoners and captives. They don't call them hostages. They call their people hostages. They get to call the people they round up and put into prisons. They call them prisoners because it's as if they did a crime. So regardless, you want to see how that forcing them to watch the footage went? Well, this was tweeted out by open source intel from the defense minister of Israel himself. Greta and her crew, her companions, were taken into a room upon their arrival to the screening of the horror film of the October 7th massacre. The Hannibal directive, in which Netanyahu ordered Israel IDF military to shoot down and kill their own people. They leave that part out. That's not part of the massacre. The massacre. The 40 beheaded babies, blah, blah, blah. They've seen the footage. No one else has. It's so bad. Well, what happened? Let's see. They were put in a room to watch a screening that was shown to them. When they saw what it was about, they refused to continue watching. Wow. So now Greta's crew of activists who are trying to feed starving children are anti-Semitic. And they're turning a blind eye of the truth and have proven once again that they prefer the murderers and the murdered to continue to ignore the atrocities committed by Hamas. Atrocities by Hamas against the Jewish and Israeli women, adults, and children. There's your psyop. There's your psyop. Well, what happened to Greta? Is she in a prison right now because she's so anti-Semitic and she hates Jews? No, they let her go because she wasn't really captured. She wasn't really being held hostage. This was all a stunt by Israel and the Western media war machine. And here is a little after theater, after performance interview. Let's see if Greta can articulate how angry she must be that they set her up and deliberately lied about her not wanting to see this. And I don't buy that for an effing second. And none of you should buy that they turned their heads and didn't want to watch. There was no footage to watch. Watch how angry she is about that. And she won't tell you that. But we know there's no footage. We know there's no footage. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Greta, spill the beans on this operation. If you are a true activist that's not setting up a PSYOP operation, tell us, expose the truth of what these pieces of effing shit did, setting you up for this. Tell us.
Reporters. Let's take a listen to what she has to say.
On international waters, we were illegally attacked and kidnapped by Israel. And
okay, so know what she's doing right here. She knows that by saying illegally attacked and kidnapped, and she knows you've seen the sandwich footage, it's going to make people more divisive. That's not the story she needs to be telling right now. She needs to be telling about the propaganda machine, how they deliberately baited and switched the whole thing and gave them the sandwich. Like, she needs to do that, not go the other direction and give Fox News more material to work with. But she's doing the thing that keeps us divided. Do you see how this works? It's a psychological manipulation. And I hate to say Craig Passa was right. He was right. This is not how you behave if you are independently doing this and they set you up with the sandwiches and they set you up to say they don't want to see the footage. She's not telling us it because she is a tool, a weapon being used against us. I don't think she is the culprit of this. Fox News wants you to think that she's independently stupid, brainwashed, hates Jews. Fox News wants you to think that. She knows that they want us to think that, and she's not correcting it. She's not exposing the fraud of Israel, the IDF, and we don't have October 7th footage to show you after all because it doesn't exist. She's not telling us that part.
Taken against our will to Israel, where we were detained, and then some of us deported, some are still there. There are very big uncertainties because it was quite chaotic and uncertain, so I don't really know what's going on. I haven't had a phone for many days.
I haven't had a phone for many days. I haven't been able to talk with my management team. They haven't given me the next move. They haven't given me my next move. So this is all I have to work with right now. So I'm just waiting. They told me just to say, things are chaotic. I don't really know. Yeah, but drive home that verbiage again, that whole thing about how horrible it was to be kidnapped by the IDF, which if you guys really think about it, those of you who have been in the streets for Palestine that understand how horrible the worst imaginable situation can be. And when you actually are captured by the IDF, it's so bad for them. And you've seen what happens to these hostages that get out of there. They're traumatized a lot more than this looks like here. And I wish Greta would, if she could tell us that this actually wasn't a capture. I could only imagine what it looks like when there aren't cameras on and there isn't this PR stunt that they fucking used us for. They used us for a PR stunt. That's what she should be saying right here. If I was right, which I'm admitting Craig was right, I was wrong. If I was right, Greta would be telling us right now that the whole thing is a PR piece and they use us. We're trying to get aid into Gaza and Israel used us to exploit us and do propaganda. But she's going with the propaganda. She said, we were kidnapped. We were held against our will. We were in AOC handcuffs. You guys remember that? AOC handcuffs. We were in AOC handcuffs. That's actually very disrespectful to the actual hostages, the actual people that get murdered and blown limbs off of and kids murdered, and they're actually taken as hostages. They're not given sandwiches. So sorry you had to smile on that. I bet you regret that. By the way, the reporter's going to ask about the smiling, and she'll brush it off. I actually don't think she meant to smile. I think that was an accident. I think she effed up on that one. That was a little, because it's really hard to buy. It's really hard to buy the kidnapping thing. She really shouldn't have smiled. I think she's embarrassed about the smiling. That was not in the contract. That was not in the PSYOP agreement.
What were the conditions for you over the last few hours?
They were absolutely nothing compared to what people are going through in Palestine, especially Gaza right now. And
here you go. Here's how you keep the divide. Here's how you keep the divide. We care about Palestine. We care about people in Gaza. She strikes a chord. She keeps us thinking. How could they do this? How could they be angry at this team of activists and Greta when the people that they're going through? So she's saying all the right things to keep us in our sides. Keep us in our sides.
This is yet another international a violation of international rights. Adding to the list of countless of such, especially towards Palestinians, that Israel are committing by blocking and preventing humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. That is illegal.
Israelis treat you? We saw them giving out sandwiches on their social media. How did they?
Yeah, they probably have posted lots of PR stunt videos. As I said, I have not seen anything.
Okay, so she admits the sandwich photos are PR stunt, but she won't connect the dots about, well, why? How are you saying that this was a dangerous situation for you after all, if you have been released and you're not, you're just going home. That's it. You don't know where, well, I don't know where everyone else is. They're all coming home. You were probably the first one they let go, and they're going to let the other ones go in momentarily. So, the sandwich stunt, oh, they're just exploiting it, but it was a really hard situation. Well, what about this footage? Why don't you tell us about the Hannibal Directive? Why don't you know this stuff? You wouldn't be, come on, Greta, you know about, you're 27 years, I think 27 years old now. I was talking to a young, we had mid-20s people that knew about Hannibal Directive we were talking to at the protest yesterday. They're younger than you. They know about Hannibal Directive. They know. Why don't you mention that here? Since you know they're running a piece on that, you turned your head and you didn't want to see that footage.
But they did an illegal act by kidnapping us on international waters and against our will, bringing us to Israel, keeping us in the bottom of the boat, not letting us getting out and so on. But that is not the real story here. The real story is that there is a genocide going on in Gaza and a systematic starvation following the siege and blockade now, which is leading to food, medicine, water that are desperately needed to get into Gaza is prevented from doing so. But of course there are many attempts like this mission, both by sea and land, to break that siege and open up a humanitarian corridor.
Could I ask you, did you have...
I would even go further and say, God, I feel so, if I was right, and if Craig were wrong, if I were right, this is what I'd want Greta to do right now. If this was a real team of activists that said the only way we can get aid to the people that are starving to death without getting blown up, without the aid getting blown up, without the people getting blown up when they go and get the aid, the only way to do that is to bring a Greta Thunberg person with us that had that clout. I would want her in this moment and be prepared in this moment, because you knew that it was possible this would happen. I would want her to be more articulate about the propaganda machine of Israel and talk about this footage, talk about what they did and what they're putting out there, and it doesn't actually exist. That would be big. That would be big, because you can call it a genocide, and great. We're glad you're calling it a genocide, but you're not addressing the root of the thing that they fabricated from the beginning, from this October 7th thing. And I just think that's a shame. And I would also want you to do this. I would want you to say, I feel like we were played, because now it looks like, so it's not just, oh, they put the sandwich thing around, oh, they're doing PR. You should point out the fact that all the people, this not just disrespects, but it's a deterrent to the cause, that you guys look like this is what kidnapping looks like. And it's not what it looks like when they actually do abduct people. This is not what it looks like. And you should say that. This is not what it's about. We weren't kidnapped. We were the whole thing was PR. Tell us that. And then I would be right. And Craig would be wrong. Because I would say that's what you do. If this was independent on your own, you would say, look what they're doing. They're trying to pretend that this is the way they kidnap people. And it's not the way they kidnap people. They don't give us sandwiches. They give us sandwiches to make it look like da. Don't tell us that you were kidnapped and you were held against your will. Don't tell us that. We know it's fake. We know it's a stunt. And that October 7th video crap, that is the worst. That is the worst. You can't tell us how bad that part is. They're telling you, they're saying about you right now, Greta, they're saying that you turned your head away from the video footage of what Hamas did on October 7th. What a horrible thing they got away with to do that. You're not pointing that part out. Tell us about the Hannibal Directive. You're a loud voice. You could say that. Again, genocide. Thank you for saying genocide, but you have to tell us. If you don't tell us about the Hannibal Directive, we're 100% sure, 100% sure this is a psyop. 100%. Unless somebody can play. Does anybody out there, can anybody find a clip of Greta Thunberg talking about the Hannibal Directive? If you can find that clip, I'd be willing to reconsider that Pasta won this fair and square, 100%. So show me that clip. I haven't seen it. Greta Thunberg saying, this is how October 7th was planned. This is how Western media got on board with this thing that was not real. It was staged by Israel on purpose to create the pretext of going in and starting the genocide. Show me that clip, and then I'll reconsider the fact that Craig Passa won this bet. I think it was like $5 or something. I don't know. I owe him something. I owe him a beer.